I've been thinking about these passages because these are the passages that actually attracted me because I am I see in the book of Deuteronomy lots of ethical principles. And as a scholar, when I applied for Hebrew Union College to get my PhD, I actually fulfilled what I came for there in my research, actually to study how to research the laws in the Torah, particularly in the book of Deuteronomy, and making them relevant. A few years ago, I was listening to a theological debate between two Christians. One Christian believed that homosexuality, or to be more precise, having sex with a person of the same gender is a sin, whereas the other opposed it. This was a huge and big debate in Christianity. Some churches, and it basically, the LGBT gender issues have split Christian churches as well as the synagogues really badly. For example, when I once visited a Lutheran church here in the area, when we were looking for a place to rent, a good lady who really wanted us to rent from them, a pastor of that church, was showing us around, and I found the brochures about their position on LGBT. Their position was like this. Their church welcomes every representative of every sexual minority because they believe that everyone has a right to love, for love and sex. It was very interesting. I will cite to you an Adventist position on the issue, because you see, this is very tricky, because there are some people who are using a totally different rhetoric, but I am just limiting myself to the issues of sex today. That's why I didn't want some children's ear to be listening to that. It's very tricky questions when you need to speak about this in front of the congregation, but it's always a challenge. How do you speak when the young children are present? So, Seventh-day Adventist position is very simple. It says, Seventh-day Adventists believe that sexual intercourse is permissible only within the boundaries of marriage, covenant. The second statement says, Seventh-day Adventists recognize marriage according to the Bible, as a union between man and a woman. You see the difference? Sex is within a marriage versus everyone has the same right for love and sex. That's the difference. That's what it is. Where am I going with that? So going back to the original debate, I told you, between two Christians. The Christians that who was a proponent of the idea that I just said, everyone has the same right for love and sex, because we're not going to deal with any other issues of which has the LGBT community. These are complicated. We're just focusing on a very simple biblical issue. And we're within a Christian community. We are not within the world, people, if people believe that they can have a wife and a mistress, of course, everybody understands you can't profess Christianity if you live like the lifestyle like this. But if you're in the world, this is beyond, what it's your choice, basically, if you want to live like this. So so basically the issue is here: does the Bible permit, or does the Bible have this kind of permission for everyone to have sex in different ways? Or does the Bible advocate specifically for sex between a married couple that consists only men and a woman? So the reason why this debate within Christianity, because the majority of Christians, and this was not within Adventism, this is within this debate between two evangelical Christians. And when I'm talking evangelical Christians, of course, I'm talking about the people who are opening the New Testament first. And of course, he opened the opponent, the opponent of this guy who defended the equal rights to love and sex for everyone, would of course start with something like, and it's very typical, Romans 1:20. Read this. You see it on the screen that people are worshiping all kinds of things. So God gave them up in their uncleanness to dishonor their bodies among themselves, to exchange the truth of God to love. For this reason, God gave them to vile passions, for even women exchange natural use for what is against the nature. So when you read this to the proponents of equal right for sex and love for everyone, and they say you're reading stuff into that, which is, I'm not gonna study this passage, but I'm just giving you this type of the argument, because this is a typical argument from from a conservative evangelical Christians against same-sex attraction and sexual relationship within the same gender. They would go for this particular text, and they will argue that these are vile passions. So the proponents of equal right for love and sex for everyone will argue against this text. So again, see, we're not talking politics here. We're talking within the Christianity, and we're talking this exegesis and theology. So this is going to be a very, very big heated debate, which will go down to a particular meanings of the Greek, where is my Greek? Of the Greek words, which you see it's Greek to you, right? So I'm not going to get to that. Then the opponents of this approach, equal right for sex and love for everyone, we'll go to 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Again, we're talking within a context of traditional evangelical Christianity, which takes the New Testament first and so forth. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, and you start with this, and they read to you, do not be deceived. That is verse 9, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals, nor sodomites, nor thieves, covetous, and so forth, inherit the kingdom of God. And of course, this is going to create a huge, huge protest within the proponents of equal right for sex within everybody. Again, within Christianity, and they will scream and say, oh, you guys are reading traditional homophobic translation of the Greek text. And again, I put you back the Greek text, and you look at this text and it's Greek to you. Again, we're not here today to study the nuances of different words within the Greek culture. Well, then some of the conservative Christians who do not believe in the superiority of the New Testament over the Old Testament will actually go much more simple route. They'll go here to Leviticus 18:22, and it says, "You shall not lie with the male as with a woman, for it is abomination." Period. And when you read this, it is much more clear and transparent and obvious than different Greek words that you may see and debate. So it's very, the text is very plain. And when the opponents of equal rights for sex to everybody read it to the proponents, and that's what I was listening when that's what struck me when I listened to this debate. I was just interested and curious. Because again, this guy is a Christian. This guy is arguing the Bible. He's not arguing the politics and stuff. It's basically, is it biblical to live the lifestyle the proponent of the idea for equal right for sex and love for everybody, is this biblical? That's the main question. So here is the text which the opponent put, and the hell broke loose. And how did it break loose? It was literally an attack against the Old Testament. It was literally an attack against the Old Testament. You can't use it. This is outdated. This is written for a totally different society. Look at this, the argument he argued. Look at this. Are you going to kill your own? If you say that the text that I just read, that you just read to me, it's abomination, applies, then you have to kill your own children. Because of this, see, there's a stubborn, rebellious son, and so forth and so forth. So the idea is that it's very sad that, unfortunately, Christianity today gets itself into a serious predicament, because they has been misunderstanding and misrepresenting the laws of the Torah for so many centuries, thinking that they are made for bad, evil, uncivilized society. And so this is the reason why I told you all this story about the equal rights and not equal rights, to prove to you that if you cut yourself from the plain text of the Torah, which is so plain and nice, then you may find yourself in predicament, as many Christians today, analyzing Romans and Corinthians, providing alternative translations, which do exist and may be correct, and then saying that traditional Bibles have homophobic slants to that. But there is nothing you can do with the Torah. There's no other way around this. The text is clear. So to get rid of this text, what do people do? They just want to get rid of the Torah altogether. All right, this is deja vu with what James in his epistle said about something regarding the Torah. I will remind you. James chapter 1, verse 23 says, "For anyone who is a hearer of the word and is not a doer, he is like a man observing his natural face in a mirror. For he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forget what kind of man he was. But he who looks into a perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this one will be blessed in what he does." You see? A perfect law. So can't throw away the mirror and think the problem is going away. So if this is the case, then it is our duty to study these different laws, because while Leviticus 18:22 is actually very plain, the other texts sometimes are not that simple, and we wonder if these texts are actually relevant. So let's go back to Deuteronomy 21, and let's take this particular case. I probably made you read, Jacob read the simple laws. What Jacob read was about pretty simple. If you see an ox or a sheep, of your brother's ox or sheep going astray, and hide yourself from them, you shall certainly bring them back to your brothers. So very simple. It's very simple because it gives you a pretty much good ethical principle. Principle is, if something belonging to your brother or your neighbor, you find it, you pick it up, and you bring it back to him. You don't take possession of it, thinking, okay, he lost it, now I'm not responsible. If someone lost a wallet and is even not aware of it, and you stumble upon this wallet, you are definitely to bring it. Honestly, I had one very, 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 very shocking experience I've lived through 23 years ago. It was the very first time I was taking the group of pastors to Israel, and it was in Kiev. And we didn't have banks at this time functioning properly. And so my goal was to take the money that people sent to Ukrainian Union and bring them to the tour company and pay them. So it was about $50,000. And the union kept them in the vault, and they were in cash. So it took us about 40 minutes to count everything they had, with hundreds and tens and even singles. Put this all in one sack. Then I was supposed to carry these, take a taxi, carry these into the tour company, and they would give me tickets and passports of all 50 or 45 participants. So I was very nervous. I don't know if any of you ever carried through a busy city $50,000 in cash in different small bills. So to guard yourself from all kinds of problems, I could get on a subway or on the bus. I hailed a cab, and they took me there. I happily, disposed properly of this money. Was all counted, few times reconciled. I get my passport. I am in such a state of relief that it was like a distress. So I need to go back to the union office. I hailed another cab, decided to spend the money. I went there, and on the way I kind of dozed off. He let me off. I get out happily, and he starts driving and drove off, and I discovered that the bag with tickets and passports was in that cab. And it wasn't a cab, it was just a driver for hire. Where am I supposed to find this guy? I thought I would be having a heart attack. I was only 26 at this time. Anyway, it was such a gut-wrenching experience for me. It was like terrible, terrible. The longest 20 minutes in my life. I didn't know what to do. I was walking on the street completely like lost. I don't know how to describe my state of mind and soul until I hear honk, honk, honk. It was the driver. He saw this thing, came back and gave it back to me. Man, it could have been in that environment in Kiev. It could have been that they would ask, if he was a bad person, he could ask certain amount of money per each passport. That would be terrible, but he just gave it to me. So I know how these laws are to be applied. I felt, how would it be if they're not applied? You know? Anyway, but what do you do with this? War, captive. You see a beautiful woman, then you bring her home, then she needs to shave her head. What's that? How do you see the difference? I mean, it is easy to transfer a lost donkey or an ox to today's wallet or ID or something. But what are you going to do with this type of law of the captive woman? Well, there's only one way. And unlike these proponents of equal right to love for everyone and sex for everyone, who, when they see Old Testament, just say, we don't need that. That's to the old days. You see, that's what I'm just saying to you guys. It's not a politics. It's not any kind of phobia or philia. It is the hermeneutics. How do we approach the Bible text? So, do we approach the text of the Torah as something, specifically the texts of the laws of the Torah, as something antiquated, outdated, irrelevant to us, civilized society, written for ruthless, brutal, ancient, uncivilized society? Well, the only way to understand these laws is to really read through them and realize what they're all about. Before I go into the law of the captive woman, I want to relieve you from the burden of thinking, what about the killing of the children? That one is a little simpler, because here, stubborn and rebellious son is not a 2-year-old toddler on a temper tantrum, because who is not listening to mother and father, and you don't bring a toddler to the court. But here, it's the reason why. This is not. This is someone who is unfortunately a glutton and a drunkard. This is not about killing the children. This is about actually the same law is found in the book of Exodus, chapter 21. And it says here, just a second. Hold on. I'll find it. Exodus. Yeah. Exodus 21:15. It says here, He who strikes his father or mother shall be surely put to death. He who curses his father and mother shall be surely put to death. As you can see, this is a development of the commandment number 5, or not rather the development, but rather application. And Deuteronomy chapter 21 is actually dealing with someone who is not again a child, but who is glutton and drunkard. So basically what it says is when parents lost all hope of control, they take this man who is not providing for them, on the contrary, threat to their life, they can take him to court. So this is basically a law of deterrent. But having spoken this, let's go to the issue of female captive. So definitely what we can learn from reading the law of a rebellious son is we need to really look at details of the law to realize that all these talks sometimes such Christians carry, oh, the Torah is ruthless and brutal and evil because they execute children. No, children are not drunkards and what the other word they're using here, gluttons. Children are not there yet. Of course, unfortunately, some may have a chance to become like this, but this is not, the childhood is not a time to decide their fate, but rather to do otherwise to prevent such a fate. So, but here is, you go to war against your enemies, and you take them, and you take captives. And here is a beautiful woman. What do you do? Well, I tell you what the Bible tells us and what the history of ancient Near East tells us about what happened when the enemy captures the city. So this is what Isaiah describes in the last verses of chapter 3. The man shall fall by sword, and you're mighty in the war. So, yes, the enemy came. The defenders of the city perished in the battle. The city gates are wide open because the walls are breached and destroyed. The gates are nothing. And then it says here in a very interesting poetic phrase, which probably harder to understand. She, being a desolate, shall sit on the ground. She, who is she? Who is her? What is it talking about? Well, in Hebrew, the word ir for the city is feminine. That's why every city, including Jerusalem, it's she. So, being desolate, the gates lament and mourn. This is the picture. The Jerusalem here is pictured as the woman that was violated, brutally violated. And here comes chapter 4. That's the continuation. Don't look at this particular digit. It is not how Isaiah was writing these digits. They were not there. So this is a continuation. 7 women shall hold to one man. We shall eat your own food and wear our own apparel. These words of Isaiah cannot be properly understood without understanding its Torah context. And the Torah context is in Exodus 21. It is the spousal obligation of a husband to a wife to provide for food and clothing and for conjugal relations. So these are 3 obligations that the husband is supposed to fulfill in the marriage: provide food, clothing, and conjugal rights. So, and that's why, by the way, in Jewish tradition, if a husband does not fulfill his marital duty to a wife on Friday night, and the reason why, except, of course, with exception of critical days, but Friday night, because traditionally people are working, don't have time for any type of baths during the work week. Again, it's all in the context of life back then. And so Friday night is the day. And so if a husband is not doing this, then the wife has a full right to suspect that a husband has somebody else. And so she can suspect that he's unfaithful to her. And so, but here, as these women are okay with, their own food and their own apparel. So just let us be called your wives. Why? Because we are raped. What's this picture? It's a gruesome picture when you think about it, because this is the picture of what enemy conqueror is going to do to city. All men shall be killed, all women shall be raped. And that's how it's done. Guess what? Not for Israel. Israel law, the Torah mandates totally different. Deuteronomy 21, when you go out to war and you see a beautiful woman and desire her, for every conqueror enemy of a pagan nations who conquered the enemy, every woman in the city are belonging to the soldiers. Everyone. There's no debate. In fact, poor women are so used to it that they wouldn't even question. In other words, if the city is fallen, poor women know what's going to happen to them. They won't even resist. It's so bad. But it's so brutally customary in these wars. And even today we hear about things like this somewhere in Africa, right? So it's not only ancient Near East, but that's the gruesome, grisly reality of this evil world of sin. A soldier captor sees the woman, she has a full right to do with her what he wants. Desires, she is his, and nobody really is gonna question that. Very sad. Very sad. Very sad stories of World War II. Americans never seen this. Russians and Germans had enough of it. 1941, 42, 43, Wehrmacht, the German army, occupied Russia. They could do whatever they wanted with Slavic women. Well, it was interesting in Hitler's Nazi theory. These women didn't even have any right to be wives. There were some love stories between a German soldier or officer or a Russian or Ukrainian woman. Both would suffer dearly. Number one, Germany would never allow marriage of a representative of Aryan race, which Germans thought of themselves, with non-Aryan race, which Ukrainians, Russians, or Belarusians is. Trust me, some of you heard my talk about racial relationships, and I kept saying to you, knowing the history, that the racial relationships are not limited to the color of skin. Because if you look at the German and Russian person, you wouldn't know the difference, only in the language. But Hitler's Nazi machine made it that Aryan nation was superior race over the Slavic, and Jews even not count. They got to be killed. There's no way. But they wouldn't even allow this. Well, the opposite was also true. It came in 1945 when Soviets came and took Berlin and other things. And again, there were rapes, badly, terrible rapes, and there were love. And now Soviet KGB would, it wasn't a racial theory, but to get a permission to marry between a citizen of a Soviet Union and a foreign national, you traitor! You betray your country! How dare you! And so forth. So these are the associations that someone who knows a little bit of history would have reading this, taking them captive, and they see a woman, desire her. So what does the Torah say? The Torah is very, very specific. And in order to explain to you what the Torah says, I need to introduce you to a biblical Hebrew syntax. For those who don't understand the word syntax, syntax is how you build your sentence. I know many Russians who don't know how to speak English. They know many words. They can understand when somebody speaks to them, they can't speak. The reason why they can't speak, because even though they know the words that are spoken to them, like in German, I know the same way. I come to Germany, I know many German words I don't speak. The reason, I cannot properly build the sentence. So, as our good dear friend of mine and Irina liked to joke, did he went? Has her gone? Did he leave her all alone? He could not was. So that's the syntax. I said every word is English, but the way I built the sentence is funny and incorrect. But this is, I am, by using this, I'm explaining to you what the syntax is. If you don't know the syntax, you will say it could not was. So this is very important when you read the Bible. So what do we hear? Every genre of the biblical literature has its particular issues with the syntax. So when you look at the law, here you see this marker. It's the particle when. That's very important. When you see something like this, you know, and now I'm gonna say a word which you may not understand, but bear with me. This when is an indicator of casuistic law. There are two types of legal sentences in the Torah: casuistic and apodictic. Let me start with apodictic. Let me find you an example in this parasha on apodictic. Okay, give me just 1 second. I will quickly find an appropriate example. So, here. How about Deuteronomy 22, verse 10? Typical apodictic law. You shall not plow with an ox or a donkey together. So, you see, that's apodictic. Why? It's not circumstantial. Just don't do this. Don't behave cruelly toward animals. That's what this law says. Or the same way otherwise. You shall make htassels or tzitzit at the four corners of the clothing that you cover yourself. So those of you may not see the talit. This is talit, okay, just part of it. This is a tassel or tzitzit here. So these are apodictic laws. They're straightforward. Just do it or don't do this. The casuistic laws do not see, the apodictic laws start, you shall make, or you shall not plow. The casuistic law always had circumstances. Look at this. If, you see, or, again, if, or, when. So in sentence like this, if I say if, then you will expect, see, when will I say then? Otherwise, the sentence or the thought will be unfinished. So you say, when, ta, 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 it should be then. It's in the then part which you have a command to do something. When or if part explains circumstances. I hope I'm not too complicated explaining you some. I hope you understand and you're with me anyway. So the key problem with casuistic law is to be able to properly separate between if and then. And the reason why Hebrew has both if and then, I'll show you how they look at. They look like this. Ki. Ki can be translated either as if or when. The biggest problem that there is no word in Hebrew for then, because you see it's conjunctions, and there are only several conjunctions in Hebrew, and there is this little letter vav. See vav here? So this vav means all kinds of things, including then. Notice this. Jesus says, until the earth and heaven passes, not one iota, and here is the letter Yud. I'm going to show you here. See this Yud? The apostrophe, that's iota. And not one tittle, that's the letter Vav, passes from the law. So these little tittles are very important because they influence how to understand the Torah and the ethics properly. So I am not going to burden you with a dissertation type of presentation, because I can probably do this, but we are limited by our time, and I don't want to. I dumped upon you enough grammar and syntax today, so let me give you a solution. So let's figure out what in this sentence, in this legal sentence, means, describe circumstances, and when do we have a command to act. So when you go out to war, that's a circumstance, and the Lord delivers them enemy into your hand, that's correct, and take the captive, and see among the beautiful woman and desire her. That's the circumstances. See, that's the problem. The New King James puts here as and then here. I have a reason to believe, based on a context, that the word then needs to be here. So if you capture enemy, see the woman and desire her, you don't treat her as pagan enemy captors do in this world that surrounds you. If you like the woman among the captives, then you gotta take her as wife. This is what the Torah requires. The woman is not a sexual entertainment or a stress reliever, because that's what these enemy soldiers, captors, do to the city. They are releasing their stress this way. No, this is not about it. You like the woman, you have a full right to like this woman. But just remember, if you do that, you must take her as a wife. So how do you take her as a wife? Of course, it's not like in this war situation, you come up with the ring, kneel on your knee and says, will you marry me, please? Or maybe you will. That's what you got to do. So your next step is this. See, this is a city. She's not an Israelite and she doesn't have the father with whom that Israelite soldier can make a marriage agreement. So there will be something different. So you bring her home. What do you mean home? You bring her to your family, because she's your wife. It's not like you are going to satisfy your sexual desire and go on. No, you're planning to have her as your wife. So she doesn't have her family. You bring her to your home. See what your folks will think. Your brother, your mother, because she doesn't have any home anymore. Okay? So then you bring her home and you give her time. So why is to shave her head and trim her nails? Very simple. Many different commentators treat it differently, but I like Rashi in this case. Rashi says, and again, we're in a context of the Middle East, not any other context, cultural context, because the issue, I mean, we all in the world are different. We have different hairstyles and hair all together. But here is what's in the ancient Near Eastern context. Remember that in Middle East, all women, even though you see the face, but you show your hair only inside your family, in front of the husband, father, brother, children, but outside you close your hair. So because hair is considered to be in that particular culture as the asset of female beauty. So at that particular case, you bring her home, and remember, he desired her. What did he desire her for? Did he get to know her as a person? No. Think about this. David and Bathsheba. Why did David desire Bathsheba? Because she was bathing on the roof. It's very natural for an instinct of man when he sees a woman naked to start desiring. And again, I repeat, instinct. But what God wants to do, of course, this one is a different culture. So the hair is something that a man in the Middle Eastern culture can look at and already desire a woman. But the Bible teaches us something differently about how do we desire each other. Not only because of the hair or the naked body, but because of the heart and soul. And to understand the heart and soul, you need to get to know much better than just having the first look and the desire came. It's the instinctual desire needs to be confirmed. Maybe it's a good, we know the love from the first look. We know that for sure. but it needs to be confirmed whether it is indeed a love and not just a desire. But here it's very good that Torah says you desire her. You desire. So that desire needs to be transferred into a real life. So how about she's without her hair, the Rashi said. Will you continue desiring her? Will you still love this woman when she is not in a different environment? So give her time before you realize an instinct and sexuality. Give her time. May she remain in the house, and of course she needs to be able to mourn her father. That's compassion, express compassion. Well, and then,
Sasha,
yes.
what are the clothes of her captivity? What is that?
Well, think about this.
The clothes of her culture?
No, think about this. You you have a destroyed city. You have all kinds of stones thrown, all kinds of things. So the clothes, whatever people have, the clothes is ripped, and again, you see. Again, here's where the instinct works. You see a woman, hair is undone and uncovered because everything is falling around, the city is burning, people are dying, right? So her head covering isn't here. Maybe she lost it. Here, maybe somewhere, here, clothes ripped. So he sees through this. That makes more desire, right? Bring her home, get her to a normal situation. Will you still love her? Will you still have this desire? Or desire will disappear. And guess what? Only then, if desire stays. If you still believe this is that person who will be your wife, the mother of your children, and guess what? Your children will inherit you. All right, then you're husband and wife. But if not, set her free and don't dare to sell her. Because you brought her all the way home. You basically proposed her that way, brought her all the way home. So this is, you see how Torah, in other words, what I'm teaching you today by giving you these examples from the Torah is to show how Torah is ethical and how profound the Torah ethics is if we understand it in a proper historical context. And that's why I read to you these lines from Isaiah. This law, as we see now, is not talking about the brutal, about Israelites as a brutal, ruthless captors, but it is actually talking and telling in that situation how to preserve chastity and honorable conduct, how to respect dignity of other individuals, even someone from your enemy who has been captured, deserving dignity. Do you realize how now it can be applied? The same way as ox or sheep can be transferred into the wallet or ID, when we understand the principle, here it takes us a little digging deep to understand that this law speaks in a language of that culture, but speaks about the principles of dignity and chastity. And there is more to it. Can you imagine, as I said, how great that there are people who follow this law, and that there was this driver who brought me these passports, who literally saved my life or whatever. I don't know what would I have done if this man did not fulfill that law. If you find a lost item and you know to whom the item belongs, you bring it to this individual. So that's the principle. What about here? What is gonna happen in that day and age when Israel follows that law? Imagine a war. Let's say some Ammonites decided to attack Israel, and Israelites struck back, and God delivered them into their hands, these Ammonites. So they walk into the city, and poor women of the city are cursing their kings, preparing for the worst. Why did these kings go to this war, and now we're going to pay for this? So these Israelites march through the city, but instead, they do not do like all other enemies. They're not trying to chase these women, 10 soldiers per woman. And suddenly, one of the soldiers stops by this house where this young lady, definitely disoriented and distraught, doesn't know what to do. He enjoys her beauty, but he is a gentleman. He walks in and says, I'm not gonna harm you, but look at what happened to your house. Where do you go? She cries. She said, I don't know what to do and where to go. Why don't you go with me? I am not going to harm you. Wow, she thinks. She heard a horror story. She was prepared for the worst, but this man really took her, had some talit, which is a clothes, covered her torn clothes, took her back, gave her food. She might have not eaten for several days, or who knows how long during the siege. Then a few days pass, and they're on the way, come back home to his village. This is my mother. This is my father. Wow, she thinks. And then she stays in their home and she observes how they worship the Lord of heaven and earth. And she sees how nice is that young man who keeps looking at her, and she says, all right, maybe my parents didn't teach me that way, but how many of women would have been like Ruth, who said to her mother-in-law, your people are my people, your God is my God. So this is what this law is all about. This is how Israel could spread the truth of the Torah and God's character, even in the wartime. This is the beauty of the Torah, that is consistently proclaiming the principle of human dignity and chastity. Amen? Let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, in this world that has a desire always to trample on the word of God, to destroy the reputation of God, help us to uplift your word, your Torah, by sharing the beauty, the ethics, and the love which are hidden in these lines written by the hands of Moses. Amen.